welcome to episode 32 of the Classical Guitar Composers Podcast, August 2021. As always, I am your host, Chris Hales, glad to be with you for another episode. If this is your first time joining me, the Classical Guitar Composers Podcast is a show that features original classical guitar compositions from around the globe. And it works as simply as you record your piece, send me an MP3 of the piece, I feature it on the show. All it has to do is feature classical guitar. And if you missed the previous episode, I highly suggest going back and listening to that. I had on guest Christian Heim from Norway, who is a luthier and composer and guitarist, and I thought it was a really interesting conversation, and I really enjoyed talking to Christian. And it also became the catalyst for a lifestyle change for me, because in that discussion, I was talking about just the limited practice time and how it's unfortunate, but that is just the way it is for me these days. But it got the wheels turning. I don't like the words, "I don't have time to practice," coming out of my mouth. I sound like a bad student. So I've started doing something that I did a few years ago, where I get up early before I go to work to practice guitar. And it's what I was doing when I recorded the American Suite. So this was really a few years before I started this podcast, but it was a great way to go. It was a good solution. I'd get up early and, the house was quiet, and I am kind of a morning person. I'm really, the best time of day for me to play is like pretty soon after I get up, because as the day goes on, I get mental distractions. I start thinking about anything you can, everything that just comes by in a day. I tried doing the practice after work thing. I get home from work. I have this designated time. I've tried everything. The problem I run into is if I don't practice in the morning, I'm just too distracted while I practice. I can't focus. I have a hard time really getting into it and enjoying it. I also seem to get gassed faster. And so doing this early in the morning thing is something I did for a while, but then I stopped because I got tired of getting up so early. But what I'm doing differently this time is something I've never tried. And really the whole reason I want to talk about it on the show. I know we all have different practice routines, and some of you probably love yours. But there might be some of you out there, like myself, who are still trying to figure it out post-college years. And, if you didn't go into a career in classical guitar, something or other, it can be difficult to find where that fits into your life. For me, it's a must. If I don't practice guitar, I actually get quite depressed. And I have found when I get regular practices in, I'm more functional throughout the day. It's kind of funny because growing up I played electric guitar, and my parents never had to tell me to practice guitar. I never put it down. I was the dude who was just always playing all the time, to the dismay of friends and family at times. Could you shut up for a second? I'm really kind of still that way. But what I didn't do growing up, when I was playing just electric guitar and stuff, was structured practices. I didn't have a scale routine that was followed by this and that, and now in college I developed an actual practice routine rather than just constantly playing. And then that routine has evolved over the years. Anyway, what I've been doing now, because even though I'm getting up early and practicing every day before work, it's still a limited time. I mean, I'm not going to be getting up at 3. So I generally have time to do my technique and then work on 1 to 2 pieces. And what I did was I printed out, I made a grid with a left-hand column where I list the pieces I'm currently working on. And then it's just a whole grid of squares going to the right. So, for example, I'm working on Villalobos Etude number 5. When I do a nice full practice on Etude number 5, it gets a little X in one of the boxes. And this way, I'm keeping track of what piece to work on. Because it just seems to be the way my brain works. I tend to want to work on too many pieces and then don't really get very far on any of them sometimes. This way, I'm making sure and getting a pretty even and thorough practice on all the pieces. I don't feel the need to jump off a piece that needs more attention because I can get the next piece tomorrow. Now, it's not as ideal as the way I practiced back when I was in college, where I would practice all my repertoire in a day, but that's just not in the cards. This is so much better than what I've been doing before, and I still haven't got to the point. The point is I have made a slot for composition. 2 slots, actually, because I have 2 different pieces in the works. This is something I've never done before. Composition's always been a thing that happens when I feel inspired, and I've never designated a time to compose. I don't think I've ever done that. And I've certainly never put it in like the list of pieces I'm working on. So now I have 2 different pieces in the works, and when I get to that one on the list, I spend my entire practice time just working on a piece. And at first I was like, I don't know if this is worth it, because it took me a while to get things moving. As I've said on the last, I don't know how many episodes. I'm sure I've brought it up, but I've had a hard time keeping the composition going as of late. Had a bit of writer's block. This just sort of forces me to get through it, and it's actually been making the wheels turn. And if at the end of, and there's been this, I've had days where it's composition day. I come out with just some edited measures. I didn't really add anything to the piece I'm working on, but there's been other days where the valve has opened and it's really moving. So I thought I would share that with all of you, because it's actually, I'm ecstatic about it. This might be the first time really in my compositional life where I have actually incorporated a routine for composing and not just relied on coming up with ideas randomly. And I mean, that's worked for me, but I could be wrong, but it feels like my output should be increasing. And so I have a theme and variations I'm doing, which is really coming along. Like it's coming along very nicely. I don't want to say it's near the end, because I've been so far going at a pace where I'm writing about 1 variation per day that I work on this, which is a really nice pace to be going, honestly. So it's coming along, but there's lots of days that go by between. The other, I've returned to working on a guitar concerto I started a few years ago, and that is the one that I tend to just sit and tweak and edit and not make a lot of progress on so far. But every time I sit down, I either, worst case scenario is I just realize that something I've already written is just not going to work, and it's like back to the drawing board. But this is getting so much more attention than it has ever since I first came up with the idea, wrote down a whole bunch of stuff, and then kind of lost focus. And then it's always very hard to return to a piece you haven't looked at for a long time, at least for me, where you were running into like problematic areas where you needed to like solve a problem in order to get the rest of this piece finished. Like, first I have to figure out this thing that isn't working. Hopefully this will start to tear down some of those barriers. So if you're like me and have limited practice time, it's something I recommend, especially if you're a composer. I recommend slotting this composition time into your routine, however it may work for you. It has really given me an uplift in mood lately, because it's very depressing to host a podcast that's all about guitar composition and yet be completely stuck and having no compositions in the works that are actually moving, at least. And I would say even if you don't host a podcast about composition, if you are a composer and you're not composing, I know you feel that void. So if that sounds like something that can work for you, I highly recommend trying it. And I hope it does. And I hope it results in more pieces featured on this show. I'm certainly looking forward to when I get to reveal a new composition for all of you. It's been a little while now for me. Be a little while longer. First, once the piece is finished, then it's getting it in my fingers and recorded. So, thanks again, Christian Heim, for coming on my show and being the catalyst to start something new and exciting for me. Aside from that, the interview was fantastic anyway. And I have teased a little bit about having a friend of mine on this show coming up, who's also a luthier. And that's still the plan, but I haven't talked to him. We were going to do it in August, but I didn't reach out to him this month because I didn't really want to do like 2 back-to-back luthier shows. But we'll get him on soon. I need to talk to him, but we'll get him on, probably this fall sometime. Speaking of fall means 2 things for me. It's hunting season, and it's horror movie season. What more does a guy need? So I've seen a few horror movies lately, and I want to react to them. As you all know, I love me some horror. I have been getting frustrated with just not seeing anything good recently with horror. I feel like everything I watch that's new, I don't like. So I felt that the stronger movies of late have been like horror comedies. Things like Ready or Not come to mind. Little Evil, Tucker and Dale versus Evil. These, movies, I'm talking movies to have come out in like the last 5 years or so. I haven't really seen a lot of just good straight up horror. I've been largely disappointed. But so expecting like, horror comedies to stay good, we saw that movie Werewolves Within in the theater, and I thought it was garbage. I was very disappointed. I did not like Werewolves Within. Online, I had noticed an article claiming that all these people were watching this movie called Girl on the Third Floor on Netflix and saying it was so incredibly scary. I gave that movie a try, and I thought it was okay. I was largely bored for quite a while. Although, I gotta actually admit, that one grew on me throughout. But I didn't think it was great, and I didn't think it was scary. And that was really the big sell on it, was that it was so scary. But I didn't really like it. I didn't hate it, but I didn't really like it. Let's see. I did recently, my wife and I, we started those Fear Streets on Netflix. Now, we've watched the first 2 of 3. So, I'm giving like a mid reaction here because the 3 very much are a trilogy that go together here. But the first one had things I liked about it in that I never really knew where the movie was going. It kind of kept surprising me at every turn. And I enjoyed the 90s setting. For me personally, it's a very nostalgic time. So I enjoyed watching a movie set in the 90s. And it had some like good 90s style horror things about it. Like they kind of did a little bit of a Scream tribute, but I thought they did it well without just mimicking it. And then the second one, taking place in the 70s, was styled very much in the vein of movies that I love, like Friday the 13th. And the second one I really liked. So, first one overall I thought was okay. I didn't love it, but there was things I liked about it. The second one I liked a lot. So I'll watch the third one. Hopefully it's good. And then I'm really excited for Halloween Kills to come out. Looking forward to that. I'll probably go see that in the theater. Candyman looks like it could be interesting. I believe that just came out. I might see that at some point. I do like the old Candyman, but not my favorite. I never saw the sequels. Anyway, there's a little bit of little bit of the horror that's been on my mind. Did not like Werewolves Within. So if you can take anything out of what I just said, it's that. I don't recommend it. You might like it though. My friend Jeremy loved it. Maybe when I have him on again, we can argue about it. Okay, let's do some email and get on to today's music. So this was kind of a fun email. This came to me from a guy named Alan McDermott. He writes, "Hi Chris. I found your podcast last night by searching Spotify for classical guitar Grateful Dead. Well, the talking part was sort of offhand, but actually contained a lot of somewhat random useful tidbits, including your love for the Grateful Dead. Real quick, that's a good description of the show, I think. Some random useful tidbits, including love for the Grateful Dead. That's pretty accurate. Anyway, he continues. The music by Etienne de Laveau was quite enjoyable indeed. I will certainly tune in and listen to more episodes, but that's not why I am writing. What I was curious about was if you knew of any classical guitar arrangements for Grateful Dead songs. And if not, perhaps you or some of your listeners or contacts might want to give it a shot. A short piece, such as Rosemary, which I love to pieces, might be a candidate, or, as you intimated in episode 30, there are a couple hundred other potential great songs to choose from. I would love to hear it and possibly even play it. I would describe my classical ability as definitely questionable, although I do fingerpick a lot of their songs on my classical, basically by the chords. Well, thanks for the show. Peace and love, Alan McDermott, Columbia, South Carolina." So, what was so intriguing about this email for me was he specifically mentioned he thought Rosemary, the Grateful Dead song, would make a great classical guitar piece. And as I replied to Alan, so did I, and that's why I arranged it a few years ago. I did a tremolo version of Rosemary, and what I did was I wrote it out, and then I got it onto Finale, and then I printed it off and worked on it some more. So, and being a tremolo piece, I just didn't stick with it very hard. I kind of got bored with my own arrangement. Practicing also was before I was getting up early and getting a better practice routine, so it kind of fell away, and I never recorded it, and I never really finished the tweaks. I actually told Scott Niebauer about it as well, but never did get back around to updating it. So, but with Alan specifically asking for this song, I went and dug it out and found it, and I even I played a little bit. I made a video of me playing, like, I don't know, the first 30 seconds of it or so, just to kind of show him what I had done with it. But now I am also feeling inspired to finish this Rosemary and actually record it. And unfortunately, I don't think I would put it on the show because arrangements really aren't something I'm wanting to get into. I'm looking more for original composition. It's funny that we both thought that song was a perfect candidate. And so what I think I'm going to do is when I finish that theme and variations that I'm working on, I will then refill that slot with Rosemary and finish that out, get it recorded. And when I get that recorded and finished, Alan, you will get a copy, and I will also send one to Scott Niebauer, my fellow Deadheads. Alan also wrote in a follow-up email, "I listened to the Christian Heim interview. It was quite enjoyable. Interesting comment about classical guitar music being for a niche audience. I am so grateful that I was introduced through my classical study to Sohr, Albéniz, Leo Brouwer, the Lute Suite, and all of the Bach repertoire, and much, much more. Most particularly, I was completely unaware of Rodrigo and the Concerto de Aranjuez. I might have died having never heard it. It is a fascinating and wonderful niche. And I watched the first episode of Loudermilk. Haha, fun stuff. Peace, Alan McDermott." I still haven't gotten around to Loudermilk, but what a sad thought, having gone your whole life and dying having never heard the Rodrigo Concerto. Now, I would say the same thing for the Tedesco Concerto. Both incredible D major guitar concertos. But yeah, it's funny, classical guitar is such a niche thing, but I really think it is the most beautiful instrument in the world. So yeah, thank you, Alan. I appreciate the email, and thanks for listening to the show. I hope you continue to enjoy it. Speaking of Rosemary, it is a wonderful song. I also love it to pieces. And you know, that album, I believe it's Oxoa Moxoa. I've never been quite sure how to pronounce the album, but you know the album. That's a really great album, and I've always been I've always wondered why the Dead didn't play more of it live. Like, I don't know if I might have one live recording of Rosemary that's, it's from the 60s. It didn't stick in their concerts for very long. And neither did like songs like Mountains of the Moon from that album, which is just such an incredible song, and I've never understood why. It's a very psychedelic album, and I never felt like the Grateful Dead definitely evolved, but I never felt like they were trying to pull away from that psychedelic era. But the only one that really stuck from that album, at least that I can think of off the top of my head, is Saint Stephen, and the whole album's really good. I have one recording from the 80s, really good concert. It was called Dozin' at the Nick is the name of the release, but they throw in Dupree's Diamond Blues, and the way that song sounds in the Brent Midland era is so awesome, because it sounds like just that. I just love the way the Grateful Dead sounded at that time, and you just didn't hear a lot of those old psychedelic songs during that era. I wished there was more of that. That is a great concert. Anyway, thanks for the email. I could easily do a Grateful Dead discussion podcast, but that's not what the show is. So probably leave it at that. Okay, and then real quick before we get to the music, I've had some emails come in from Martin Slater. I haven't even opened these yet, so I'm just going to dive in cold. This is just titled A Short Update. Chris, my main activity this month was to write 2 extensive concert reviews for those I mentioned previously. Been doing a deal more running lately too. The main musical event has been the purchase of the latest MacBook Air laptop, plus the download of the free version of the Sibelius notation software. This is a concerted attempt to kickstart my creativity, barring not too many more demands on my time from my daughter. Time management is the ordeal of the day between this, football, and another concert review on the 11th of September. Martin. Well, that's the topic of the day, Martin. The running's fantastic. You know what? I'm glad to hear that. I'd like to see more people trying to get healthy right now. So good for you on that, Martin. And awesome about the MacBook and Sibelius. I hope that does kickstart creativity. I've never used Sibelius. I'm a Finale guy, but I recently had to use MuseScore for something at work, and I believe MuseScore is something close to Sibelius, if I'm not mistaken. And I thought it was pretty easy once I adjusted to the differences from what I'm used to. But yeah, Martin, I hope that does kickstart some things. And then a second one came in. Martin writes, Chris, I remember you said you had not heard of Gary. Well, one of his compositions is called Scenes from the Wild West, which features 6 pieces which are certainly worth a listen, particularly for someone who lives in the western U.S. He has recorded them on his CD Worlds Apart, and Martin provides the website. All the best, Martin. Yeah. Thank you, Martin. That sounds similar to my American Suite. So I'm going to definitely check that out. I'm assuming you enjoyed the concert, Martin, and also, I'd be curious to read your review, if you'd be interested in sharing that. So very cool. Thank you, Martin. Okay, and now is the point in the podcast where I highly recommend pausing, refilling your iced tea, or whatever it is that you like to enjoy in tandem with some fantastic guitar music. I'm excited about today's music because this features an ensemble that I love, flute and guitar, which I don't believe we've had featured on the show yet. So, this comes to us from Jared Stephen Coffin, who is a concert music composer based in St. Paul, Minnesota. And Jared writes, "Hi Chris, I've recently found the podcast, though I don't recall how anymore, but happy I did, and have been really enjoying listening to the past episodes of the show. Not through all of them yet, but it's cool to see the different styles and approaches composers take with the classical guitar. I also want to express my appreciation for taking on this kind of undertaking. It's great to see a platform for guitar composers with no criticism, gatekeeping, or stylistic constraints. The guitar and composition communities are better for it. I studied classical guitar in my undergrad and am ultimately a pretty poor classical guitar player, but I have a deep love for the instrument and love to see new music written for it and see it put in new chamber music situations. That is why I've gravitated toward writing guitar plus music, and it is a little less intimidating than writing for solo guitar. Even as a guitarist, I am reluctant. I hope to have a finished and recorded solo guitar piece this fall. I am sharing two pieces with you today. Both are premiere recordings and are decent as far as premiere recordings are concerned. Number 1, Winter Chickadee for flute and guitar, featuring Megan Reich on flute and Nikola Koravlev guitar. I apologize to the guitarist. I'm sure I'm not getting that name correct. The second is Sidera Lumen for chorus and guitar, commissioned and premiered by the Minneapolis Madrigal Singers, with Nikola on guitar again. P.S. I love Letterkenny. Just listen to that podcast. And I will say that it is not too far off from people I know around Minnesota, so I'm guessing Canada is like that too. Ha. All right, thank you, Jared. I'm looking forward to these, and yeah, I'm still really enjoying that show when I get one in here and there. So very cool. There was something else you said that I wanted to... I agree that it is less intimidating to write for guitar ensembles, guitar plus music, as you put it. There is something, even as a guitarist, that is difficult about writing a solo guitar piece. I think for me, it's a balance of trying to utilize the instrument, what it can do that others can't, without sounding like pop music for me. A lot of what the guitar is unique for is used so prevalently in pop music, I think, and that's where I get hung up. It's also just a hard instrument to write for. I mean, it really is, because with all that it can do, there's so much it also can't do, and you have to find solutions around them. It's kind of part of the fun of recording, though, I think. Composing for it. So, with that being said, I will provide a link to Jared's website, classicalguitarcomposers.com. If you want to just go off memory, it is jaredscoffin.com. And here is Winter Chickadee and Sidera Lumen. Alright, and there it is. We've just heard two pieces from Jared Coffin, Winter Chickadee, and Sidera Lumen. Thank you, Jared. It's much appreciated. And check out Jared's website, jaredscoffin.com. You can look on classicalguitarcomposers.com as well for that link. So that's the show for today. Thank you all for tuning in. I've already got music in the shoot for September. And remember, if you'd like to hear your piece on this show, just send an MP3 recording to chris@classicalguitarcomposers.com. And until then, keep on plucking.